つ怒りが己もくさびに誰と新しく生まれたものは冷たくて熱い未来風よ払え虚しさのことそして涙も乾いたら心引き裂いて捧げよう明日へと闇も愛も夢も悲しみも祈り捧げる愚かしさ認めて立ち上がれ命の輝きが濃くなるそれでも止まれない運命の嵐へとサレンダーの死のどこくへ光に照らされ覚悟の道を
Hello and welcome to the rap party for Muv-Luv Total Eclipse, the Imperial Capital Burns. Man, it's such a long title. So thank you so much for anybody who's showing up today live, but also thank you to anybody who's watching this in post. As you know, as you most likely know, but I'll go over it again. Rap party is just a name I give for the capstone. It especially is helpful with series that have multiple branching paths that I don't showcase entirely on the channel, but lets me have an opportunity to express my thoughts about every aspect of the game. So this is completely spoilers-erific. It's not only going to be spoiling this story, but I'll be talking about maybe little bits and pieces of other stories. Though it's probably not going to happen too much because this is relatively well contained. While it involves characters and events that are very important and critical to the rest of the Muv-Luv narrative, I'm not going to be focusing on that so much. I really want this to be a focus on the characters and the narrative that's highlighted specifically here. I'm going to go over everybody, like the main characters and their struggles and interesting aspects. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about like what I feel like the big points of this narrative were. Like, it wasn't just a story about Yui and her growing up. There was actually a lot of really powerful and interesting insights into the Muv-Luv universe as a whole that I feel like they were almost like specifically canonizing, which I thought was very cool. It is, however, a shorter series, so I imagine this rap party will be a little shorter than usual. But in the end, not only are we going to be able to have fun just talking about like really great characters and amazing universe, but we're also going to talk about the next series that will be starting on Monday, and I'm very excited to have. So, hope you're ready and buckle up for that, because it's going to be an interesting ride, let's say that. Alright, so first and foremost, I normally focus on the characters, and I am going to be doing that, but firstly, I kind of want to talk about something I feel like is really impactful for the narrative itself, and that's the technology. And also just applications of battlefield tactics and battlefield strategy and the way it's developed and also framed for the series itself, because I think, honestly, that's almost the more real story that's happening here. We hear a story, the story revolves around Yui, of course, but I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about like the nuts and bolts and inner workings of the Royal Guard, the Japanese Defense Force, and just in general how the TSF training programs developed, grew, and kind of got their foundations. As well as just TSF development, which again, it makes sense because TSF development is so crucial to Total Eclipse to Total Eclipse's core. It makes sense that there would be a lot of emphasis on it in a prelude to it as well. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is the Zaikoken. I believe it's the precursor to the Takamura Yui. It's the specialized Royal Guard TSFs that they are using in the final fight sequence. It's really cool to see that the design language is already so expressive for what would become the Takamura Yui, which we see the debut of at the end of the series, which is really cool to see, and even see the design, the idea behind the namesake for the TSF that would become kind of the golden standard for third generation TSFs, in my opinion. Obviously, there'd be a lot of debate at that, but I still think the Takamura Kazuchi, while specialized, is still probably one of the most just dashing and impressive TSFs. And so it's really cool to see its precursor. I also thought it was really powerful to see the hypnotism and the post-hypnotic suggestion and the drugs that were administered in high critical situations, because whilst they always were mentioned, most Muv-Luv stories don't make too many references to their actual use and application in combat scenarios. I think the only other time that we really got a good look at it is in, I think a bit in Unlimited, but mostly in Alternative with Takaru and the incursion of the beta during the training exercise. That is where we kind of saw it in action, but after that, it never really came back up again, or at least not in a notable way. It's pretty clear, however, that the post-hypnotic suggestions and even the drug administrations are kind of automated and are meant to be deployed fleet-wide. So every story we've read with TSF pilots engaging in battle, almost all of them likely have been under the influence of post-hypnotic suggestions and the deployment of battlefield emotional suppressants. We did see it one other time in the day after, but only in the intro sequence when they had their partial squad and they had the kind of the rookie pilot with them, and she got administered drugs and got a bad trip and it led to her death. Other than that, we just don't talk about it much because we usually focus on these awesome pilots doing really cool things, and I can see why narratively people might want to step back away from this idea of post-hypnotic suggestion being a major part of the incredible feats and capabilities that they achieved during combat. But I feel like it is pretty evident that it is a major contributor to these battles and the sequences and the combat prowess of some of our favorite characters. Granted, they're still at their core themselves, but it's just really neat to see that really just down-to-earth, unfiltered look at their application in battle, what they're capable of doing, and the dramatic effect it has. There's a lot of talk about bad crashes, which I almost forgot. By the end, I started to wonder if maybe it was almost more of an excuse to kind of write off people who make really odd decisions during battlefield scenarios, which we'll talk about a little bit in detail. But for example, the things that Izumi did at the end of her life, they didn't scream to me a bad trip. It screamed more of just a psychotic break. Essentially, she'd just been, despite the drugs, pushed beyond her own mental capacity limits, and reality started to become what she wanted rather than what it really was. And that's really interesting to see. Okay, the music's a little loud for me, but I don't know if it is for you. I'm turning it down just a smidge because my dashboard's telling me it's fine. All right. So I guess the only other thing about it that I really wanted to talk about was how much they were able to explore the flight suits. Again, I've always thought the flight suits were, well, first of all, they look great, even though they're not meant. They're meant to be attractive, but they're also functional, in that really clever way anime does sometimes, right? It's not just anime either. I think all fantasy tends to do this. I mean, look at shaped armor you find in fantasy video games and stuff. It's just, it's a thing, and it's fine. Mythics Sci-Fi, thank you for popping in. Love the series. I know I do too. Muv-Luv is such a it's like the Mount Everest of stories. It just never stops, and it climbs so high you start feeling like you're about to just leave the planet entirely. And I feel like it's going to be super hard for me to ever find anything I think can actually challenge it on when it comes to scale and just the emotions it makes me feel, and just the thought that's put into character development, which we'll talk about a bit. Okay, so I think I'm done with technology. There's really not much else to say. Just really wanted to kind of touch base on that. Now we're going to talk about characters. So I'm going to go kind of in order that I feel like the characters that are of note that I want to talk about, but also the level of impact they ended up having in the story. Now, obviously, this is subject to my own opinion, but I'm gonna kind of go in order. So we're gonna start with like the less impactful and build up to the more impactful, and then I'll kind of capstone it off with my favorite character. So, all right. So first we're gonna start with Yui because she was here. She had a great sequence. Again, it was mostly for to kind of help us see a bit of the politicking and the political intrigue going on behind the scenes. You know, it wasn't so impactful for the narrative of the characters that we were following, but she absolutely had her moment to shine. And being one of my favorite characters to this day, I think I said it at the end of Altered Fable, I've always been and will probably forever be a major fan of Maya. But Yui, being her twin, she drives a hard challenge, because while Maya is the most pure person you could ever meet, Yui is just so clever and so whimsical that I think they would be really fun they both would be people who would just be very enjoyable to be around. And so it's hard for me to really nail down which of the two I genuinely prefer. But that's neither here nor there. Her role in this obviously is meant to, she's being set up to be the manipulative, like, seat of authority. And we see at the end, though, the Ikaraga guy, or whatever his name is. I can never remember him. I just hate his face. I remember I hate his face. It's very clear he wants a puppet to kind of control. We see that specifically manifest in The Day After, but in this series, we can see that he's already trying to set the board to make it so that he will have the power, but maybe not so much the focus. He wants to be the quote true power behind the throne. And Yui is a likely candidate for manipulation, and that he and others all see. But I like how even when she was this young, you know, like was she like supposed to be like 14, 15, 16? I can't remember like exact age. Like I don't know if they specifically said, but even at that age, she had a good sense of that situation and was already proactively planning around it, which was very cool. So her role's small, but I did enjoy having her in the series. The next person I really want to talk to is Kyoko. So she's the beautiful, absolutely one of the most amazingly designed characters we've seen in the Muv-Luv series, in my opinion. She's the one that gave advice to Yui. Kind of, they have like the bathroom scene, which, you know, again, dancing on the fan service, but it was actually a very meaningful scene, which I really loved. Who also came to rescue Yui at the end, flying illegally the Takamura Kazuchi for the first time. So she's fantastic, clearly a good pilot, has a really good sense of morals, the drive to do what she feels is necessary, willing to take on challenges and even risk her own reputation to do what she felt is most important. Very, very strong character. Again, I honestly feel she could be a contender for one of my favorite characters of all time. She's got everything I see so far. She has tons of just really positive points as a character and as in her character design, her motivations, all of it. Just absolute, seemingly tens across the board. But we know so little about her, I can't really be much of a judge of her character. I really hope we get to have more insight into who she is or was. I think someone mentioned in a comment that she has a kind of last stand moment in the progression to Operation Lucifer, which is essentially the destruction of the Yokohama Hive and the retaking of Japan's mainland. Somewhere in there, she has a last stand moment, it seems. I don't know. And it's implied the person who said that in the comments also pointed out that there might be another sequel to a prequel. So a sequel to this story that talks more about the continued crumbling of Japan and the formation, and then the formation of the Yokohama Hive, and then the recapture of the Hive, which would be a great. I've said for a long time I would love to see how that all played out, because we get glimpses of it, but it seems very interesting. So I'd love to see more of it. And if we do, hopefully we'll see more of her. Although sadly we also probably will see her grand finale, which would be very sad. All right, the other persons of note were the instructors. Sanada and Seiko, I think, were the two that we see. The instructors were really cool because they gave lots of really good instruction. I liked how their exposition was delivered. And I also thought it was interesting that the game seems to give you an option to skip the exposition. I wonder if like the writers have heard that being one of the bigger criticisms for new fans to the series is that sometimes it just drones on and talks about stuff that they like maybe a chunk of readers, more casual fans, are just not that invested in the world yet, and thus they don't really care. And so it's interesting that they gave, like, the major choices in this game were essentially options to skip exposition, which I never skipped. I loved it all. I eat that for breakfast. I think world building is the best part about universes like this. And again, visual novels are some of the best storytellers because they can dive so much into the worlds whilst also supplementing like what would normally be just a novel, like a book, with art and character design that help fill in those blanks and help kind of bring it all together in a way that is superior to movies because of the depth it can challenge, and in some ways better than novels because it takes away some of the interpretation from the narrative, but that also can be good because it helps the fan base all have a good foundation to build off of instead of bickering over tiny details. We all kind of are given a good canvas to work with, and I love that. So the instructors just do a good job at world building, and I liked how even though they were essentially meant to be exposition and inspiration for the main cast, they ended up also being very impactful to the story. Sonata and the rest of the squad, their sacrifice at the end, whilst it didn't end up saving everybody, it definitely gave Yui, Yamashiro, and Izumi a chance. And I feel like that was a really powerful moment to have them rise up and be like, we've cared about you. Like, they always felt that division because, remember, they were like typical soldiers while they were there training the, like, quote, pampered children of the Royal Guard families. And yet they still genuinely just cared. They hated that that these children were having to go through such terrible training, including like the mind altering hypnotism and the drugs, and just watching how it was literally killing some of these kids, or at least as good as killing them. And so when push came to shove, they jumped in back in their TSFs, flew out to the battlefield, and made sure to do the best they could to protect those kids. It was really cool. And I feel like it was exemplary of teachers. The majority of people who are dedicating their lives to teaching children aren't doing it because of like monetary gain. Like, we don't pay teachers enough. They do it because they care. And I feel like that comes through in this series really well. That love that teachers can have for students that transcends it's almost like the same love that a parent has for children. But, you know, it's just really well done. Also, just this, again, this art, man, whew. YouTube, I'm lucky YouTube's as nice to this channel as it is, honestly. Anyway, jumping to some of the big characters. Like we're pretty much done with all the side stuff. So now I just want to talk a bit about the main cast. So I want to talk first with Shimako. Shimako, I thought she was lovely, but she had probably the flattest character. Her motivation was very, very moving still. Like, even though she's the flattest character when it came to like character development, it still was powerful. This idea that she kind of was always at the buffets and the whims of the manipulative, like, political machinations of her family, and how she never really had much autonomy. Of the four girls in the squad, well, like the three girls in the four girls in the main squad, she had the least autonomy, where she just kind of followed orders and just was always taught to do her best to do what she needed to do. The one time she ever really showed a true expression of herself and her feelings was right before the final battle, when she was kind of letting herself have a moment with Yui's belongings, where she very clearly had a very powerful crush on her. And it was almost like her little rebellion, knowing her family would never approve, knowing society would probably never approve, but it was an honest, genuine affection that she had. And that was really, really powerful to see. And it also made it so bittersweet. Well, not bittersweet, just terribly bitter. It was sweet to see just how much she was genuinely just wanting to do the best she could. But it was so sad that her final moments was her in a panic, desperately hoping that she hadn't been a burden to Yui and the squad, and that her last thoughts was feeling like she had somehow messed up and ruined things for everybody. And it unfortunately was because she was so obsessive about trying to make sure Yui was okay that she inadvertently kind of crashed out. And that was really sad, especially to die to a laser. Like, that's always, like, the lasers are genuinely, if I were on those battlefields, lasers are the scariest things. I think Fort class are less scary and terrifying than the lasers. And so to see her go down like that was so hard, especially personally. But as a character, I loved her design. I think she had the best design of the core characters. Well, Yui has a really solid design, but she still, I feel like they really nailed her design for Total Eclipse proper. So barring that, I think Shimako, I just like the way that they designed her. I thought her hair looked really pretty. The bow was a really nice touch, kind of heralding to a Sumika vibe, which is kind of cool to see. This intro is really good. I actually, I almost want to get this music on a playlist because I do like this intro song a bit, but I can't understand it. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's hard to put it in a playlist because, like, if I'm listening to it, it's great, but if I'm sharing it, people, are like, okay, whatever. Anyway, personal struggles of being a fan of visual novels and anime, right? So next I want to talk about is Aki. Aki, she was the character that I immediately just didn't like. She's meant to be kind of obnoxious, but for me, personally, I've never meshed well with that type of person. I can admire her spunk and her ability to kind of roll with the punches, and I loved her drive and her determination, which got what a powerful reveal to realize that she had her that close connection with her twin brother and their competitiveness, but how he died and she didn't even know why or how, or she was told a story that was very almost dismissive, that either was just one of those really unfortunate battlefield moments, kind of I imagine how it would have felt being a trained warrior going into a battlefield in medieval times only to be cut down by an arrow from an archer you never saw. Like that so much potential and so much training just snuffed out because of bad luck. And either that's really how it happened, or he was part of an operation that then got covered up. Because remember, that's what happened for the agents for the Valkyries in Alternative, is that they were in major world-changing operations, but when they died, because it was all top secret, they essentially were just sent back to their families, or whatever was sent back to their families, the remains, with a message of they fell in battle. Just something very vague and usually almost a dismissive death, which is really sad because they deserve so much more, but they understood that they couldn't have more. Anyway, so Aki, her character was very frustrating for me just because of her personality and how dismissive, or how she tried to trivialize stuff. But the source of that being the way that they feel like her brother was mistreated and just ignored, even though he was supposed to be this specially trained member of the Royal Guard, but how in the end he was nothing but chaff to higher ups, and she just was so disgusted and disillusioned by that. I understood her frustration, and by the end I had a real appreciation for her. And again, another just really sad end for her, where just it was a chaotic time and she got taken out really suddenly and unexpectedly and had a very drawn out and very painful death, but her last thoughts were almost like a relief that she'd managed to finally beat her brother at something, which was survive longer than 8 minutes, which is really depressing when you think about it. It's I win, I didn't die in the first 8 minutes. And again, that 8 minutes of death thing just is horrifying. Can you imagine if modern day war battle statistics were that grim? Can you actually imagine that? That's terrifying. Ugh, makes me just almost sick to my stomach thinking about it. All right, next is Izumi. Funnily enough, Izumi reminded me a lot of how I was in school. Very let's follow the rules, let's not rock the boat, let's just kind of keep things just level-headed. Right? But then she became my least favorite character, but it's not, I can't really blame her for it. is the thing. She went through a real rough thing. She genuinely was in love. And even if you're young and dumb, like, those feelings are real. To then have her loved one immediately get cut down in the beginnings of the most horrifying thing which could happen, which is a genuine, like, invasion from the beta on your homeland marching towards you that second. So you don't have time to process. You don't have time to grieve. You're in panic mode, and you're trying to process your grief. She genuinely loved him. But, like, I was so disturbed and frustrated with her desire to immediately just try and, like, she essentially was jumping into her TSF, ready to die a, like, Viking death in battle. You know, she was trying to go to Valhalla, essentially. And it was so sad because she really was endangering herself and her team because of that attitude. It made her very unstable and made it very frustrating in the final fight because she'd gone from, like, this rock to this, like, borderline psychotic, and that was hard to see. Her character design's fine. I felt bad for her, but I was so frustrated by her, like, letting her emotions rule her actions and what it ended up doing to her. The only time that really kind of took my breath away, though, was the realization that when she died, her whole world had devolved. That, like, whether it was, like again, I mentioned this earlier, that, like, they kind of made it sound like they were blaming the post-hypnotic suggestions and and drug overdosing for her, like, snapping. But I actually think it was a display of her mental exhaustion. It's pretty clear that when our minds are pushed too far, whether it be through something like excessive dehydration and fatigue, or lack of sleep, or in this case, like, just overwhelming stress, our brains kind of go into this, like, emergency default where they've tried to protect us and our psyches by literally making the world appear different. And when that happens, it really just makes people do very weird things. Imagining seeing pools of water in the desert. Imagining people are around you and start talking to them. And one of the creepiest ones for me was hypothermia. I grew up in Scouts, and hypothermia was the thing we talked about a lot, and something we kind of confronted because we would go camping in the winter. And the first time I went, I thought I had enough gear and the proper gear. It turned out I did not. I had gear that was good for, like, marching through snow between houses or from school to home and school. But for a long-term camp out throughout the night, I was woefully unprepared and struggled very much with the cold. And luckily had, like, adults and leaders around who understood and were able to help me, like, kind of deal with it. But what a miserable night. And, like, dancing on, like, the border, like, knowing how close I could have been to literally freezing to death. And then you learn and see, you can even see, like, really crazy videos of people who are experiencing hypothermia, and in the final stage of hypothermia, you stop feeling cold and you start feeling hot. And so people who pass away of hypothermia will be found in the wilderness, like, laying almost naked in the cold, frozen to death, with a string, with like a chain of their, like, of them pulling off their coats and their scarves and their gloves and their hats and, you know, their jackets and sweaters and boots, because they feel too hot when they're literally freezing to death, because your brain is just so traumatized and so tired and so desperate to try and, like, find peace that it starts convincing itself that it's safe. And that's exactly what happens to Izumi. She went to this La Land and walked into the train station waiting for her loved one, her boyfriend, to come home again, because that's what he always promised he would do. And she just stood there until she got eaten. And that's horrifying. Like that's a horror on a whole nother level. And so in the end, she just hurt my soul. Next, I want to talk about Yamashiro, who is kind of the poster girl for this whole game. She's Yui's, like, guiding lighthouse, and inspiration, for good reason. She was definitely one of the most interesting characters. She was really cold, ice princess type at first, but when we cracked through that shell, she rapidly rose to be one of my favorite characters. Just really enjoyed her. I really liked her pragmatism and her realistic point of view. She didn't shy away from things, and she also didn't mince her words, which is something I really appreciate just in real life people. I know I'm really good at political correctness, just not so much like, oh, I don't want to insult people, but just more of like, I've learned through my life, because my mom was especially very, very particular about this type of stuff. So I learned from a young age, like, the way you say things is important, and it changes the way people see you and the way that people think about you. And you can often have polar reactions from the same information just on how you deliver it. The way you deliver information is really, really, really important to how people will receive it and interpret it. And so it's something I always overthink. And it doesn't bother me too much, but when you spend so much of your life, like, it passively just overthinking all conversations you're about to have, and the way you want to phrase things, and the positions you want to express and how you want to express them. Because again, it's not like you should fake your points of view. You should never do that. You should always, like, communicate your thoughts and your intentions and your beliefs, but you can do it in a way that fosters communication. But when you're thinking about that over the time, one of the most attractive and just appealing things for me is someone who's just really blunt. Because I always am so stressed about the way I communicate with people. It's refreshing to have somebody who just says it how it is and what they mean, even if it hurts sometimes. I'd rather be hurt by, like, directness than trying to guess what you're actually trying to tell me all the time. So I've always enjoyed characters like that, and I really like Yamashiro for that. And it's funny because Yui exemplifies her so much that Yui kind of becomes that character in Total Eclipse. Like, she has a very similar mannerism, which I love, absolutely love. And so yeah, that kind of leads us, well, I guess, yeah, before we get to that, Yamashiro's death scene is, I thought Izumi's was bad. That was horrific. And people said that, like, the anime clarifies and kind of paints this picture that she's horrifically wounded, she can't get herself out of her TSF, the beta are slowly creeping toward her, getting ready to eat her, just as Yui shows up. And then Yamashiro, like, despite knowing it's probably best just to not, for Yui to just sneak away, because she gets so terrified and doesn't want to die a horrible death, begs Yui to shoot her, to kill her before she can be eaten. And Yui tries, but misses. And so she still gets eaten. And with the last few seconds of her life, she detonates the fuel and tries to essentially save Yui's life. She fought to the end, and it'd be so horrific to watch that in person. Like, I was saying at the time in the episode, and I still say it to this day, I'm amazed Yui is sane. Because watching that, even with drugs and post-hypnotic suggestion, like, I don't know how you process that. It implied that she kind of had suppressed those memories, but I imagine that eventually she remembered it. And just the fact that she still was able to keep walking forward is a testament to her character. It's amazing. So Yamashiro did not deserve her death. She probably could have been one of the greatest TSF pilots that the Royal Guard ever had. She had already learned so much and was so wise and talented when she was in the academy. And it's really sad that she fell, especially in such a frustratingly and depressing way. And oh boy, that catching of the head, ooh, that was something. I said it, kind of hinted at it before, but unfortunately, her death scene was essentially the reverse Chomp. Because the Chomp scene was a soldier sneaking up on Marimo and taking everything above the jaw off. And in this case, everything from the jaw up was all that was left of Yamashiro. And I think that was on purpose, and I both love and hate that. I see the poetic mirror there, and I can appreciate it, but I hate it. I hate it with everything I am. And then finally, of course, Yui, poster girl of the series. This story is ultimately about Yui understanding the ways that she actually views the world, because she'd built up in her mind a palace of ideals and used it as her own self-defense. and was unable to see how she really looked down on the people around her, how even her squad mates that she genuinely cared for, she saw as lesser, as not struggling as much as her, who didn't have the right perspective, that she had to gently coast along and kind of nudge in the right direction so that they could maybe someday be on her level. And Yamashiro kind of pointing that out to her was really cool and really powerful. And I feel like it was an important lesson that Yui needed that became very foundational for who she becomes as an adult. So it's really cool to see that growth and also see the fruits of that growth through Total Eclipse. And then we also get to see her relationship a bit with her mom. We got to see her mom, which is cool. I was hoping we'd see her dad more because he's so important. And we know so little about him other than like what we've heard in little tidbits, but we didn't really see him. We really got to see the beauty of her ideals and how she had a pretty good reason to fight, but she had to kind of learn that it wasn't enough and that she needed to have her own reason, which is, again, that's a theme of Muv-Luv, is why do you fight? Like, what is it that drives you? What are you willing to sacrifice for? And is it actually what you're willing to do? Or is it just an ideal that you think you would be willing to sacrifice for? And I feel like that was really cool to see for Yui to go on her journey on that path. And also to see her very vulnerable. She was vulnerable with her friends and her squad mates. She was vulnerable in the face of a battle, like where she immediately was panicking and had to kind of process that. Where she was vulnerable, where she was on the edge of sanity, when she had to watch all of her friends one by one die, and then to see that, like, in the end, even when she was slowly like rebuilding her physical and her mind and her body, she found hope in the cries of a child, and found that, like, even on a general sense, that there was a future that was worth fighting for, even if it meant suffering so much. A really powerful lesson, really neat to watch her go through it. I wish I could be half the human that Yui is, even if she's a fictional character. I wish I could be that strong. I wish I could be that capable when the crap hits the fan. I've never been put into that situation yet. I hope I never am, but I hope that the inspiration I can get from stories like this can help me maybe lay a foundation so that if that ever happens, that I can be a person who lives a life and even lives a death that I can be proud of, you know? I think that's the best thing that Yui teaches in both stories, is trying to live without regret. All right, now we're pretty much at the end. There's not much more I want to say. It's been a shorter stream, but I don't know. It's been like 40 minutes, so that's not too bad. So first off, I have to kind of do a crown. I always do a best girl. I even do best boy, but there's not really a whole lot of boys in this, so my best boy is going to have to go to the instructor Sonata, just because he was the GOAT. He was really cool. But best girl, that's a tough one. Now, it might not be surprising. I've definitely dropped some hints, but in the end, best girl of the Imperial Capital Burns has to go to Yui, because I'm such a biased and just absolutely a simp, and it sucks, but Yui's just the greatest. But she's not a main character, and based on just her appearance here, she's probably not best girl for this game, but she's the best girl that we see in this game, so she'll win that. I also think Kyoko, again, would be a really solid contender, but I feel like I just don't know enough about her to really be able to say, like, yeah, I love her as a character and really enjoy, and I think she's one of the best. She's got a lot of the stuff that makes her fantastic. So I really think she has potential to be one of the best characters for the Muv-Luv series, but I'd need to know more about her first. So as it stands, I can't really make that judgment call, though she's definitely a high contender. But as far as the main cast goes, it's interesting because in the end, it kind of falls back to Yui. Yamashiro is a real close second, honestly. Again, I really like her as a character and her bluntness. But Yui, I feel like Yui's just got it all. as a character, I feel like she's the kind of person whom I really wish I could actually be friends with someone like her. I wish I could have gone to school with someone like Yui. Obviously, I wouldn't want to live in the beta universe, but if I had to, Yui would be one of the top picks for someone that I would have to, like, you know, spend time with in a school or in a squad. Obviously, like, I really like Yui and Maya, but they're like in lore, they're so unapproachable. It would be so unlikely that I would actually be able to spend time with them, or that they would even pay any attention to me. I'm no talkative after all. But like, as far as the character goes, her design, her behavior, her motivations, and just overall, she's really one of the best characters. She really was a top character in Total Eclipse at 2. I think she was my favorite in that as well, or I can't remember. It was really hard to pick in that one. I remember that. I was flip-flopping a lot. But she was definitely a major contender. And so she's really, really positive. It's really fun to be able to follow her story here. But again, it's also so hard because, like, again, they're all so young. This is them, like, in middle school, high school, like, right on the border, if I remember correctly, for like 15, 16. And, like, granted, that was when I first was really getting, like, into, like, dating and all of that. But even beyond that, it's like you changed so much since then. It's just nice because I see through the stories who Yui becomes, and she's such a fantastic person. She's somebody who you'd want on your side, you'd want on your team, you'd want as your friend. She's, like, so solid. She's a rock of a character, and it's amazing. So, of main characters, Yui is probably best girl of this game. Now, again, competition is not super steep. There's just not a lot to pick from. And the other real contenders are just such minor characters that, like, they really don't stand a chance if you really think about it. So, yeah, that is pretty much all my thoughts on the Imperial Capital Burns. But now we have something interesting to talk about. Because, you see, we're going to start a new series next Monday. I've been covering Muv-Luv nonstop on Mondays for years now. Ever since Extra, I fell in love with the series, and because fate adores me for whatever reason, every time I started approaching the end of published works, they would publish new things. I remember as I started approaching the end of Alternative, I genuinely thought it was going to be done, but then they published Photon Flowers, Photon Melodies, and those took a while to get through. And after that, we had Total Eclipse get an official translation, and then the day after, so I played through those. Then we got this Imperial Capital Burns. And there's more to come. But we have run into a problem. Because really, this is kind of the end for now. Now, the story, I can't remember the Japanese title, but the story that's based on the Rumbling Hearts, so, like, it's kind of like the prelude and covers the stories for, like, I don't think Isumi's in there, but, like, the other members of Valkyrie, like Haruka, Akane, and her sister. Oh gosh, it's been a while since I thought of her. I don't remember her name. But their story comes out. In fact, I technically have the copy, and the official release, oh gosh, I guess it did just happen, didn't it? That's technically Muv-Luv Associative, but it's in the Extra universe, and it's really far removed. So I was thinking about it, but it's also brand new. And I think it's always best to kind of give a little buffer zone. And with it being kind of on the questionable side, I decided to do something a little different. Because I made a promise to people a long time ago. One of the first times I did a poll about, like, games to play, I asked my channel at the time, which I believe was, like, at 1,000 subscribers, maybe less. I said, hey, what's a series that we really want to cover after we finish Muv-Luv? And we got an answer. And it's another long series. And while I love Muv-Luv with all my heart, there are some stuff in the pipeline, and I kind of want to let them cook a bit. So, for the first time in ages, I am officially stepping away from Muv-Luv Mondays. They'll come back. Don't you worry. We had the second part of the day after. I think they hinted that they're going to be, like I said, exploring like Total Eclipse after the Imperial Capital Burns time. What's the one that happens in Europe? The Schwarzenmarken or something? I could never remember its actual title. That one is like hinted at that it's going to get an official translation. There's a lot. So why don't we just let them cook for a while? Maybe give them a few years. And in the meantime, we pick up something new. It's funny because I had a feeling that there weren't going to be a lot of people watching this live stream, and that's okay. And so it's funny that probably what some people are going to consider one of the most monumental announcements for the channel is happening right now, and most people are going to miss it. So a lot of people are probably going to get a real big shock next Monday. But if you're here watching this live or watching this in post, let's take a quick peek at what we're going to be doing. I wish we didn't have to end on this, but it's okay. Higurashi when they cry. I made a promise a long time ago. If you get the elevator with the age CEO, it's a fist fight. Like, why? Because you wanted this to publish more stuff? Yeah, I know, right, man? I know, right? But I feel like we might be able to still have some fun. Yeah. Higurashi when they cry. Now, this is a big series, I know. And it's got chapters. And apparently there's a patch. I'm going to be asking the community to make sure, like, I get the best version of this. But the thing is, it's been a long time coming, and I got a good feeling about it. So, let's let Muv-Luv cook a bit, and we're going to jump into this. Higurashi and most likely Umineko, but no locking in. I feel like we'll probably go through the Higurashis, and then if at that point we've seen some pretty major Muv-Luv releases, I'll probably jump back into that for a little bit, and then we'll finish Umineko. You know, maybe kind of go back and forth a little. But, yeah, we'll just have to see. I'm really excited about this, though. I think it's going to be fun. And I think it's also one of those series that, like, there's a lot of people who love this show, these visual novels, but there's not a lot of coverage, especially not a lot of full coverage. A lot of people drop these series because they're long, and a lot of people don't make extended narrative content. But I'm going to, and I'm very excited. So like I said, I'm going to dive into it. Apparently, it's kind of similar to what we've seen with the Trail series. Apparently, they had a release for the game that was a bit like they did a later release where I had like updated art and voice acting. I'll probably try and get that installed, but yeah, we'll have to see. So Higurashi, and also just I hope this is the right place to start. I tried to look at it, obviously avoiding spoilers, but then I realized that there's like Higurashi, and there's Higurashis that have different names at the end. I don't know what that means, and so like just make sure I'm actually starting in the right place. I'm gonna be asking in the Discord, but yeah, we're gonna be starting Higurashi starting next week. Oh boy, I'm sure it's gonna be fun. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today. Mythic Sci-Fi, thank you for your brief comments, and anybody else who was here, thank you so much. To anybody who's watching this, in post, I hope you enjoyed. It was a really fun breakdown. Muv-Luv will never die on this channel, but it's finally time we let it rest, let it cook, and we'll come back to it when we can dive headfirst into several new projects. But for the meantime, I hope you have a great rest of your day, good rest of your week. Got lots of good stuff coming out. We're going back on schedule, so rewrite. We got Trails. We got, oh my gosh, I'm brain farting. Oh yes, of course, we got Chaos Head, which is the new series on Fridays. Really, really fun so far. I believe next Tuesday I'll have the next Baldur's Gate series. And I've got some stuff that's changing up with schedule, so we'll have to see how that all plays out. But the Baldur's Gate one, unfortunately, I should have had it out by now, but I got really sick, and when I got really sick, I just couldn't record, and so I unfortunately fell behind in that processing. But I'm very close to being able to edit and then pump it out, so I'm hoping next week it'll be ready. But thank you so much. You're all wonderful. I hope you enjoyed this live stream, And until the next video you're watching me, or if you see me in next, I'll see you there. Have a good day. Or night, or wherever you are. Bye.